special report on the flood of 1977. This will be a comprehensive, close-up look at the devastating and disastrous flood which has just ripped through Keystone Country, particularly Johnstown. We repeat, tonight at 11:30, TV 10 Action News will present a half-hour special report on the flood of 1977. Join Eric Rabe, Fran Fanchelle, and John McClintock for complete news and film reports. That's tonight, 11:30, on WTAJ TV 10.
Now, TV 10 Action News. Eric Rabe and Keystone Country's #1 news team with the area's best report of news, sports, and weather. Reporting Action News, here is Eric Rabe.
Good evening. Last night, history repeated itself in Johnstown, and today the flood city is again underwater. 8 people are now dead because of the tragedy in the Johnstown area. Others are still reported missing, and property damage will run into the millions of dollars. Fires are a major danger because firemen and equipment can't get to them in many areas, and there has been some reported looting. The city is under virtual martial law. Civilians are not allowed downtown. We have 2 reports tonight on the situation in Johnstown from Fran Fanchelle and John McClintock.
They said it would never happen again, but it did. Torrential thunderstorms soaked the area late yesterday, and by early this morning, it was impossible to reach what has come to be known as the flood city. Early last evening, it looked like just another rain, but soon sewers could no longer handle the crush. Water backed up behind the bridges where debris had jammed, and the flood of '77 in Johnstown had begun. Area highways buckled or totally eroded, others clogged with floating automobiles. Firemen had to watch helplessly throughout the night as several homes and businesses burned to the ground, not for lack of water, but for a means to get to them. And though the terror of tens of thousands of residents was at its greatest in the wet dark, morning brought the full realization about what had happened. The entire downtown area was either flooded or knee-deep in mud. Red Cross officials worked quickly using boats to transfer blood from their disabled refrigerators to a nearby dairy. Other boats that arrived as a result of appeals in other areas ferried stranded homeowners to higher ground. Hospital officials say they were able to maintain basic operations with only 2% of normal electricity, but still 3 persons died in one facility overnight.
The hospital was flooded in the basement. There was no water damage from the first floor up. The water stopped about 4 inches under the first floor, so all the patient areas, diagnostic areas were not affected.
It was Johnstown's main shopping area that was hard hit in previous floods, and this year was no exception. But the major problem for merchants and police was mud and the fear of looting. Both state and local police patrolled the sector, and with orders to shoot to kill looters, chased all civilians out of the area. Still, other civilians volunteered their assistance and patrolled with shotguns. But it was not the downtown area that was worst hit. Nearby Hornerstown was still a series of rivers and lakes late today. Residents say at least 3 bodies were taken from the neighborhood. Cars upon cars upon cars were piled against everything, and piles of brush made it hard to discern which houses were simply covered or were totally collapsed. One survivor of the flood of 1936 said this flood was every bit as bad.
Cars are piled up more. There's more debris, I think, and everything else. In compared with 36, you didn't have all this that you're looking at right there in the corner.
All the debris. Did you ever think it would happen again?
No, not with the river wall, and I never thought it could happen.
It was not apparently the fault of the dike levee system that Cambria County flooded this morning. Instead, simply too much rain for sewer inlets and a series of dams building with debris at bridges. Mayor Herbert Fuel estimates damage in the city will total $100 million, but that doesn't include probably the outlying areas. Just getting to Johnstown today was an accomplishment. The major artery into town, Route 56, was only a patchwork of a highway. Piles of rock and brush extended at times over 4 lanes of the road, and in other areas only 2 lanes of the highway were left, the rest being swept away by angry waters. Police and rescue agencies found the quickest way in by air, and at any one time you could spot 5 helicopters shuttling people and supplies from the devastated area. And what about the people? Well, some came to see a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle. Others, weary from a night-long vigil, worked silently to dig their way out of the mess. And for the families of those who lost their lives in the flood, it will be a storm and a day never to forget.
If you've never seen a flood firsthand, if you've never waded knee or waist deep in mud and water,
If you've never seen the agony and despair of the people with their cars piled on top of each other and their homes destroyed, well, there's no way you can imagine it. Back in 1936, the residents of the flood city thought that they had seen the last of the great floods, but they were proved wrong in 1977. John McClintock, Action News, Johnstown.
The view of a city underwater and in trouble is what would greet federal, state, and local officials when they ventured downtown. Mud and water filled the streets, with broken glass and concrete all around. The excavations for the Main Street East redevelopment project, which had created ugly holes in the city center, no longer looked out of place among the ravaged storefronts and chopped-up streets. While comparisons with the floods of '89 and '36 were unavoidable, this time the city looked bombed out. Law and order had broken down. Coordination of disaster and security arrangements centered at the Johnstown airport. Governor Schaap, Congressman John Murtha, and Johnstown Mayor Herb Fuel were flown in by helicopter to confer on security and disaster arrangements. Mayor Fuel described a scene of devastation and looting. Mayor Fuel made it clear he didn't want New York-style chaos.
Keep it under control. We're not going to mess with anything other than to run a tight ship. And the citizens are cooperating very well.
We have the situation under control?
I think we have it very well under control, but we're going to keep a lid on it.
Did you give an order to shoot to kill?
That's right. Anybody who loots is going to suffer the consequences, and they vacated town very, very quickly. We're not going to tolerate anything in the city of Johnstown that's done in other cities. I'm not going to tolerate that.
Johnstown a ghost town now?
No, sir. There's a lot of state priests and a lot of citizens in Johnstown protecting their property, and they're doing an excellent job.
The governor arrived mid-afternoon after declaring the entire area a disaster, and he hoped federal funds would start flowing soon.
And our first step is now to get contact with the White House in order to advise them of the real seriousness of this disaster up here.
How extensive do you think it is?
It's quite extensive. It's let me say, it's I won't use the word miniature, it's smaller than Agnes, but it's certainly a disaster of monumental proportions.
Senator John Hines and Congressman John Murtha were also on the scene and plan to accompany the governor on a brief tour of the devastated region.
I talked to the White House this morning twice, and they're concerned. They want to report as soon as possible, and of course, as soon as I get downtown and see what the situation is, I got a full report from the mayor and the other folks that have been down there, and we'll try to get a report back to the White House and see what we can do.
Murtha said reestablishing security and communications with the outside world were priorities. Although the military scene at the airport seemed to indicate the situation was in hand, no one could say whether authorities had regained full control. Fran Fanchel, Action News, Johnstown.
The National Weather Service has issued the following update on the Johnstown situation. The bridge over Legislative Route 46264 over the Conemaugh River has water on its west side now, and it's expected that that bridge will be covered with water and closed shortly. Further rises are predicted for the Conemaugh River tonight as water upstream continues to move down the river. The bridge at the boulevard is closed now and covered by 10 feet of water. And the National Weather Service says everyone living down the Conemaugh River from Johnstown should be alert to further rises in the water level tonight. An emergency communications network has been set up by amateur radio operators based at the Hollidaysburg Courthouse. It can establish direct communications with Johnstown. This is certainly not the first time water has covered the streets in Johnstown. The flood today is compared most frequently with the flood of 1936. But the flood city got its nickname from the flood of 1889, when more than 2,000 people died. Dan Mountney has a story on that.
The Johnstown flood of 1977 brings back to mind the Johnstown flood of 1889. That disaster took nearly 2,200 lives and caused about $10 million damage. Needless to say, rescue operations and communication systems were much less sophisticated back then, and when the old South Fork Dam gave way, most people didn't have a chance. One survivor recalls what she saw.
No, we weren't too close to the river bank, and while we were watching, just bridge was gone, just as though somebody lifted it up at each end and it went.
During that flood, watersheds were overrun with about 5 billion tons of water. Although nature itself was the primary cause of our present flood, the 1889 flood could probably have been avoided if the South Fork Dam had been maintained. Dan Mountney, Action News.
Action News will broadcast a special program on the flooding in our area and especially in Johnstown today. That program will be on the air here at 11:30 this evening. Also tonight, the trial of the 12 Hanafi Muslims who took over 3 Washington, D.C. buildings in March is expected to go to the jury late today. The 12 are accused of murder after one reporter died in that incident. Israeli Prime Minister Begin says his country is willing to negotiate separate peace settlements with the different Arab countries. And he says Israel will deal directly with Palestinians who are not representatives of guerrilla organizations. And Vietnam will become a member of the United Nations this fall after the Security Council today agreed to admit that country. We'll have details of these and other stories on the CBS Evening News at 6:30. The heavy rain that fell in our area last night caused problems all around central Pennsylvania besides the devastation in Johnstown. Dawn Ross has a look at what it was like in Altoona late last night and today.
Sewers like the troubled ones on 7th Avenue in Altoona were unable to handle the runoff. Driving was slow at best.
I think this is one of the worst storms I've seen in 4 years I've been up here.
Electric power and telephone service was disrupted. Channel 10 was unable to carry local broadcasts from our Commerce Park studios until after midnight. We made radio-like announcements and carried network programming. Lightning struck Penelec substations, blowing fuses and knocking out lines. Penelec said its protective equipment worked well and the damage was minimal. At times, all of Blair County was black. Portions of Altoona were without power for 6 hours, the Buckhorn area black for 5 hours, and the Williamsburg area without lights for 2. As the rain continued to fall, the usual trouble spots like here at the Loop area in Hollidaysburg, and they found that the river was mostly in its banks, but as you can see here, just barely. With the flooding emergency in neighboring Cambria County, the civil defense here responded to a call for boats.
Called the local radio stations and asked for boats. We had a response of about 8 or 9 boats. I set 3 boats by 10 minutes of 8 this morning and the rest are on standby.
Altoona's hospitals were taking in patients from northern Cambria County who were unable to get to Johnstown's hospitals. 4 people were treated for flood-related injuries at the Altoona Hospital, 1 admitted, 3 admissions at Mercy Hospital, 9 people treated. AMED was placed on standby for possible use in Cambria. There was the possibility today that the hospitals in Johnstown would be evacuated, and the Altoona hospitals were preparing to take in patients.
Between Mercy and VA Hospital and the Altoona Hospital, we could comfortably handle 300. We would have to dislocate patients and mobilize people to handle more than that.
Should the rains hit the area again soon, Red Cross, the civil defense, the hospitals, and other agencies remain on standby tonight. Don Ross, Action News, Blair County.
As we're just into the Action Newsroom, the death toll now in the Johnstown flooding stands at 10. 2 more deaths have been positively confirmed. All other areas in central Pennsylvania were heavily hit by rains, and 6 counties have been declared disaster areas so far. John McClintock has a report on the damage outside of the counties of Cambria and Blair.
Practically no region of central Pennsylvania went untouched by yesterday's rains. In northern Cambria County, the town of Nannyglow saw 1 bridge crack under the rushing torrent of water, and another, a railroad bridge, disappeared altogether. A bridge in Blacklick Township washed away, leaving a small community totally isolated. Route 422 across the Cambria line into Indiana County washed out completely and took with it a pile of cars. The first obvious sign of destruction as one travels south along Route 219 toward Johnstown is just north of Sidman, where a bridge is washed out, debris is along the highway, and even the foundations of homes washed away. These scenes were repeated everywhere. In Bedford County, the Raystown branch threatened a new shopping center, and in Jefferson County, Big Run made life uneasy in Reynoldsville. 5 trailers were washed away near Mahaffey, Clearfield County, and only Huntington and Center counties escaped the worst. John McClintock, Action News.
Ron Klink has a look at the sports this evening.
A lot of people didn't get to see the All-Star game because of the power blackout. And we'll try to make up for it right now. Well, after what turned into a surprise thriller last night, the National and American Leagues take off tonight before resuming action tomorrow. The senior circuit took the annual All-Star Classic last night by a score of 7-5. In that game, it proved much closer than most people had expected. Dave Parker of the Pirates singled once and scored in 3 times at bat. Then Pirate relief ace Rich the Goose Gossage came in and pitched in the 9th inning to end that contest. Tomorrow, the Bucks return home to Three Rivers to host the Cincinnati Reds, but for a few hours last night, the Bucks and the Reds, the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Phillies alike all put it together for a display of how baseball was meant to be played.
Cincinnati's Joe Morgan led off the game with a home run over the head of Reggie Jackson. That put the Nationals ahead by 1. It was never that close again. After George Foster doubled home Dave Parker, Philadelphia's Greg Luzinski drove another one over Jackson's head into the stands for a 4-0 lead in the first. Steve Garvey, one of 2 players to receive more than 4 million votes in the All-Star balloting, homered in the third for a 5-0 lead. That's when Billy Martin said that's all for tired starter Jim Palmer. Palmer asked Billy, "What took you so long?" Then Minnesota's Rod Carew, the other 4 million vote getter, went for the stands 417 feet away, but he was robbed of extra bases by George Foster, who banged into the wall with a leaping catch. The other standout catch came on a Joe Morgan fly to center, Boston's Fred Lynn doing the tricks. The American League finally got on the board in the 6th when Richie Zisk doubled home Carew and Fred Lynn, but the Nationals coasted on to a 7-5 victory for their 6th straight and 14 wins out of the last 15 All-Star games.
Well, in the continuing trials and tribulations of George Atkinson versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, the good guys got some help today. That came when an NFL official testified that he believed the defensive back deliberately delivered a hard tackle to Lynn Swann that, of course, caused a concussion and placed the wide receiver's career in jeopardy. That official, by the way, was Art McNally, who's the supervisor of the NFL officials, who was in San Francisco to testify in the $2 million lawsuit against Coach Chuck Noll filed by the Raider defensive back. Well, with Terry Bradshaw in San Francisco to testify at that trial and Mike Krutzik away with flu, well, that leaves the Steelers now with only 2 quarterbacks, and that is Cliff Stout, a rookie, and another guy who hasn't been doing too well this year. So the Steelers really having their problems spending more time in the courts than on the field.
Okay, Ron. The state legislature is set to consider the latest compromise version of the state budget. It would raise taxes by $390 million, and that means that the income tax cut Pennsylvanians got in 1974, when it went from 2.3 to 2%, would be wiped out. The proposal was reported out by a revised conference committee yesterday, and 2 top Democratic leaders had resigned from the committee. Leaders of the House and Senate now say they have the votes to pass that version of the budget. Money is apparently going to be needed to repair some bridges in Blair County. The State Highway Information Association says a 6-month investigation of state roads shows 9/10 of the bridges in the Commonwealth are substandard. Don Ross has details.
The association says of the 27,000 bridges on state roads in Pennsylvania, 3,000 of them pose a daily threat to the safety of the people who have to use them. Mostly, they're too narrow or dilapidated. The association says there are 13 such bridges in Blair County. Blair County's bad bridge count isn't as bad as neighboring counties, according to the association's figures. Clearfield County has 36 substandard bridges, Center County 34, Huntingdon 46, and Bedford a whopping 58 substandard bridges. Cambria's dangerous bridges number 17. The association made a similar study 4 years ago and reports little progress has been made since then in repairing dangerous bridges. Don Ross, Action News, Blair County.
Well, the weather's on everybody's minds, and certainly Ron Klink's mind is included.
We're working on it, and today we hit 90 degrees again, Eric, and that helped us to maintain a 7.5-degree average above the norm. Our overnight low last night being just below 70 at 69 degrees. Present temperature is 89 degrees, so we've only slackened off a bit. The barometer at 30.04 inches of mercury, and it's steady, humidity 57%, winds from the northwest at 12 to 20 miles per hour. That's your sunrise and sunset time, and temperatures throughout the area. Still 90 in Bedford, 91 at Clearfield at this time, 91 also in Huntington, Johnstown. One thing, they've got relief from the heat down there at 81 degrees. Well, we can see that we've had clouds and thunderstorms, and in fact, the whole system that delivered that bad weather to the Johnstown area and the Bedford area last night, causing severe flooding, is still with us, and that is a trough aloft with a lot of turbulence, a lot of moisture, and it meets this hot air. In fact, hot air all over the nation. Only 2 states, Montana and Washington, did not hit 90 degrees. The rest of the continental United States did hit that. Well, we'll have a temperature that also includes some 90 degrees for you tomorrow, and we'll have the forecast right after this. Clouds staying in our picture tonight, 70 degrees our overnight low with a 20% chance of showers throughout the evening. That'll increase tomorrow as we again build up to about 92 degrees and a 40% chance of precipitation for tomorrow. Overnight low then getting down below 70 finally. Clearing out Friday, temperatures not quite as hot. We'll be in the high 80s with overnight lows still staying around 70 degrees. Again, a 40% chance of precipitation early Friday. That will diminish as the day goes on. Saturday and Sunday, very clear days with a high on Sunday only being 83 degrees. So the cold front coming in, cooling things off a bit.
And maybe some relief from the rain. Thanks, Ron. Commissioners of Clearfield County have received word from the Department of Labor and Industry that several features of the jail do not meet state requirements and must be corrected. Mifflin County Commissioners have decided the Mifflin County Airport Manager, Lanny McCoy, is no longer eligible for the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act funds. Saxton Borough Council is advertising bids for construction of a water line in the industrial park there, and about $10,000 in federal money will be available. A computer error by the Federal Economic Development Administration has reduced the size of a grant to the city of Du Bois by $1,000. Residents of the Mifflin and Mifflin Town areas have complained about the problem of dirty water to the Mifflin Town Municipal Council, claiming that problem has been there for years. And Donald Hamilton turned out to be one of the most welcome guests at the swearing-in of Boston's new police commissioner the other day. Hamilton is one of the city's 10 most wanted suspects, or he was. As patrolman was lining up cars for the ceremony, he spotted Hamilton nearby and made the arrest. Hamilton was wanted on a variety of assault charges. The CBS Evening News is coming up next for the Action News team. Eric Rabe. Join us again tonight at 11.
This has been TV 10 Action News, Keystone Country's #1 news team with the best area report of news, sports, and weather. The next Action News report tonight at 11, here on WTAJ TV 10.
WTAJ TV in Gables of Altoona think people are great. People like Joe Riley, organizer for Little League Baseball in Altoona 27 years ago. Through Joe's efforts, over 6,000 boys have had a chance to play organized baseball. A day long to be remembered for Joe Riley was when a field was dedicated in his honor. 90 years young, Joe was recently named Senior Citizen of the Year. Congratulations, Joe Riley, for proving that in Keystone Country, people are great.
WTAJ TV Altoona.